Jesus Christ. Okay. Why is this not opening? Why is Google so weird? I'm just trying to see the chat on my phone. God. That's all I want to do here. Live, and it's not showing even though it's public. Very cool. Oh god, how do I do this? That's not what I wanted. Well, hopefully this fucking shows. God fucking damn. Okay. So. I'm just gonna start watching the videos. Start with this.
World War II exploded onto the global stage, a world had already been simmering with a host of smaller conflicts and tensions for years. But everyone was too caught up in daily life to see the bigger picture. Let's fast forward to 2025. You've probably heard the old story about the frog in boiling water. Drop it in suddenly and it jumps right out. But heat the water slowly and it never realizes the danger until it's too late. Right now, the West might be that frog. As we scroll past the headlines, Russia inching into neighboring countries, cyber attacks shutting down power grids, troops massing along NATO borders, it all seems like background noise. But zoom out and it starts to look like history repeating itself, and not the good kind. To make matters worse, Europe's long-standing safety net, the United States, is starting to fray. Once reliable transatlantic partnerships are straining to a breaking point. Washington is questioning NATO's relevance and stepping back from global commitments. And for the first time in decades, European leaders may need to defend itself without its most powerful ally. This isn't a momentary shift, it's a warning, a fundamental change in how the continent thinks about war, peace, and survival. To understand how Europe is responding to the growing threat of war, we need to first understand what it's facing. The battlefield has shifted, not just in geography, but in form. Russia, for one, isn't playing by the old rules of war. They've gone full multi-dimensional chess. In recent decades along NATO's eastern borders, they've positioned over 30,000 troops near the Suwalki Gap, the narrow corridor connecting Poland and Lithuania, making the Baltic states perpetually nervous. Previous to the 2022 invasion.
Yeah, I just thought that. I didn't even realize they're actually putting it in the Kaliningrad area. If that's what they're doing, then Lithuania is kind of fucked. we really need to get some fucking troops out there.
Corridor connecting Poland and Lithuania, making the Baltic states perpetually nervous. Previous to the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, their massive Zapad military exercises simulated capturing Baltic capitals in under 60 hours. It's not exactly subtle, but conventional tanks and troops are just the visible tip of the iceberg. Back in 2007, Russia's cyber units took down Estonia's digital infrastructure, and it regularly probes European power grids, banking systems, and government networks. The 2022 attack that disabled Ukraine's satellite communications right before the invasion was straight out of their standard playbook now. Some Europeans may remember winters when they couldn't afford to heat their apartment. Well, they can thank Russia's energy games. Before the Ukraine war exposed the vulnerability of this controversial energy source, Russia controlled 40% of Europe's natural gas supply, and it wasn't shy about turning the taps on and off for political leverage. Germany's rushed construction of LNG terminals wasn't just about going green, it was about survival. While everyone watched Russia, China quietly became Europe's landlord. They owned significant stakes in 14 major European ports, including Greece's Piraeus, Germany's Hamburg terminal, and key Italian shipping hubs. When a Chinese company buys your local port, it's not just business, it's Beijing gaining a strategic foothold. The tech situation is even more concerning. European universities and tech...
Yeah, guys, get ready to buy yourself a graphics card now, because in about, if all things go to shit, getting a graphics card in the next 5 years is gonna be nearly impossible. And if you do get it, it's gonna cost as much as a fucking car.
Tech firms have hemorrhaged critical knowledge to Chinese partners.
Especially with all the AI technologies being so prominent, like processors and stuff like this. It's all gonna be fucking used in drones and those fucking robot dogs that are gaining popularity now with every single army around the world.
That advanced AI research from German universities, those semiconductor designs from Dutch labs, they often end up in Chinese military applications faster than European countries can say export controls. Meanwhile, China's military isn't just staying in Asia anymore. Their navy conducts joint exercises with Russia in the Baltic Sea. Chinese, quote, research vessels monitor NATO operations in the Mediterranean. Their global surveillance network can track European military movements from space. While Europe sees China as a trade partner, Beijing sees Europe as the soft underbelly of Western power, a region ripe for influence, investment, and subtle disruption. China is playing the long game, building leverage points without firing a shot. In another trend that ominously echoes how events played out in the 1920s and 1930s, gone are the days when international agreements actually meant something. The Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, or INF Treaty, is dead. The Open Skies Treaty that allowed verification flights over military facilities have been abandoned, and the START nuclear treaty is on life support. We're reverting to a world where military might trumps legal agreements. The institutions designed to prevent
it's basically like before World War II, guys. So get ready, all the kids in the chat. Get ready to go to the fucking front line soon.
Another war are themselves on the brink. The UN Security Council is paralyzed by Russian and Chinese vetoes and an increasingly unpredictable United States. The World Trade Organization can't resolve trade disputes. Even NATO faces internal fractures over defense spending priorities. When Turkey can block Swedish membership for years and Hungary regularly sides with Russia, the Mutual Defense Guarantee, NATO's core promise, looks increasingly shaky. This isn't the Cold War with clear sides and rules. It's a brewing free-for-all where aggressors exploit every vulnerability, all while deliberately staying just below the threshold of open conflict. Europe isn't a monolith. It's a patchwork of histories, geographies, and defense priorities. And while the threats may be continent-wide, the responses are deeply regional. From the icy Arctic to the sun-baked Mediterranean, every corner of Europe is gearing up in its own way. Some are digging trenches, others are dusting off old doctrines, reviving conscription, or building next-gen cyber units. To understand how Europe is preparing for what could become the unthinkable, we need to zoom in, region by region. Let's start with the Eastern Front. No region feels the Russian threat more acutely than those countries living in the shadow of past occupations. Poland isn't just building an army, it's assembling a fortress. By 2040, it aims to have the largest land army in Europe, with over 300,000 active personnel and a defense budget exceeding 4% of GDP.
Yeah, I think the 300,000 man target is supposed to be the fastest they want to hit it is in 2 years' time. We've already got 200,000 soldiers, I think,
buying
that are in active duty.
hundreds of tanks, HIMARS systems, F-35s, Apache helicopters from both the US and South Korean suppliers. Warsaw is preparing not for a war, but the war. The Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania have embraced a total defense model, blending civilian resilience with rapid mobilization. Their small size is their strength. They can shift gears fast, mobilize reserves, and activate national defense leagues within hours. School children learn first aid. Citizens know how to defend infrastructure, and in a crisis, every laptop and rifle counts. Romania and Bulgaria long
Pause this so I can actually look at the chat. Yeah, but it's not working. God damn it! I need to fix this so I can see people coming with or commenting on YouTube. I did it yesterday somehow and now it's not working. Like, I just want to watch the stream so I can have the fucking app. Oh. Okay, I have no idea. I have no idea how to use this.
underestimated in NATO are reinforcing their Black Sea defenses amid growing Russian naval activity. Romania is hosting more U.S. troops than ever before and investing heavily in F-16s, missile defense, and naval modernization. Bulgaria, though slower to act, is finally awaking to the strategic urgency of its coastline and energy infrastructure. The North has always taken security seriously. Cold, remote, and rich in resources, it's a place where strategic depth matters. Now it's preparing like never before. Finland, still fresh-faced at NATO, brings not just commitment but a national defense blueprint envied across Europe. With universal male conscription, a large trained reserve, and a deeply embedded culture of resilience, every Finnish family knows where the nearest shelter is. Sweden, after decades of neutrality, has made a hard pivot back to defense. Following Finland's example and becoming NATO's newest member in 2024, it's rebuilding its coastal defenses, modernizing its air force, and reinstating civil defense training. Sweden's legendary warfare state is now training citizens, not just to care, but to fight. And Norway keeps its eyes peeled at Earth's highest latitudes. Its Arctic strategy involves defending vital shipping lanes and monitoring Russian military activity across the Barents Sea. With advanced submarines and joint U.S. exercises in the high north, Norway is a silent sentinel guarding NATO's icy frontier. For decades, Western Europe basked in the peace dividend. Now the bill is due, and a rearmament revolution is underway. Germany's Zeitenwende, or turning point, is more than a political slogan. It marks a seismic cultural shift. After decades of underspending and strategic ambiguity, Berlin has pledged 100 billion euros in new defense investments, rebooted its domestic arms industry, and started the slow march toward military credibility. France never let go of its martial instincts. As Europe's only nuclear power besides the UK, Paris is quietly upgrading its sea and air-based deterrence while flexing its expeditionary muscle in the Sahel, the Indo-Pacific, and Eastern Europe. France wants to lead, and it's willing to fight to prove it. The United Kingdom, post-Brexit, is positioning itself as NATO's premier naval power. The Integrated Review reset its priorities toward the Indo-Pacific, but the war in Ukraine recentered Europe. Now the UK is balancing both, deploying strike groups, bolstering cyber units, and investing in next-gen submarines and stealth fighters. Southern Europe has long juggled economic strain, regional instability, and proximity to volatile neighbors. Now it's recalibrating defense policy to meet growing threats from both East and South. Italy is doubling down on defense industry modernization. Leonardo, its defense giant, is supplying high-end tech across NATO. Rome is walking a tightrope, honoring its NATO commitments while stepping up as a leader in Europe's defense future. It's investing in drone warfare and pushing for stronger interoperability across European allies. Once focused inward as NATO's lowest spender, Spain is slowly ramping up its defense spending and procurement. The country's investing in cyber defense, naval upgrades, and enhanced readiness forces, all while contributing to NATO missions in the Baltics and Africa. Greece, wedged between multiple fault lines, has always lived with a heightened sense of threat. Turkish tensions, refugee flows, and energy disputes in the eastern Mediterranean have prompted Athens to sign multiple defense pacts, including a landmark deal with France. It also has bought Rafale fighters, frigates, and drones. Greece isn't just reacting, it's preparing, pledging as proof to spend 25 billion euros over the next decade. Everyone knows that national efforts can only go so far. A Russian missile won't stop at the border, and a cyber attack won't politely knock before spreading across a continent. And that's why individual preparedness, while essential, isn't enough. European security depends not just on national arsenals, but on the ability to act together, seamlessly, rapidly, and decisively. From revamped NATO commitments to ambitious EU defense projects, Europe is learning the hard lesson that survival in the 21st century requires more than strong walls, it demands a united fortress. After decades of fighting out-of-area conflicts, NATO is once again laser-focused on the defense of Europe itself. The 2022 Madrid summit marked a turning point, announcing a new force model that replaces the Cold War-era tripwire posture with real forward-deployed firepower. Under this model, over 300,000 troops will be at high readiness across Europe, with national units pre-assigned to specific defense plans in case of crisis. Part of this evolution includes a massive expansion of NATO's Enhanced Forward Presence, or EFP. What began in 2017 as 4 battle groups in the Baltic states and Poland is now growing both in size and scope. Additional multinational units are being stood up in Slovakia, Romania, Hungary, and Bulgaria, bringing heavy armor, air defense systems, and combat support units closer to Russia's doorstep. Behind the scenes, NATO's command structure is being retooled for speed. The creation of 2 new operational commands, Joint Force Command Norfolk, secures Atlantic supply lines, and Joint Support and Enabling Command streamlines logistics. These commands are aimed at preventing the alliance from being caught flat-footed. In short, NATO is no longer just talking deterrence, it's wiring itself to fight. Once mocked for its sluggish pace and political infighting, the EU has begun to act with surprising urgency. The European Defence Fund, EDF, now coordinates billions in research and development spending across its member states. Meanwhile, Permanent Structured Cooperation, or PESCO, provides a framework for 60-plus multilateral defense projects, from maritime drones to cyber defense networks. At the strategic level, the EU's Strategic Compass, adopted in 2022, outlines a vision for a credible EU defense posture. It calls for the creation of a 5,000-strong rapid deployment force by 2025, which by and large it has created better crisis response tools and enhanced coordination with NATO. It's not an EU army, but it's something closer to an EU coherent security identity. Perhaps the most underrated initiative is military mobility. Funded jointly by the EU and NATO, this behind-the-scenes project is removing the bureaucratic and physical roadblocks that once hindered troop movements across Europe. All across Europe, bridges have been strengthened to carry tanks, rail gauges are being standardized, and customs processes digitized. Europe's long-standing dependence on U.S. military tech is slowly being rebalanced through joint programs designed to build cutting-edge systems at home. Leading the charge is the Future Combat Air System, or FCAS, a Franco-German-Spanish partnership to develop a 6th-generation fighter, drone swarms, and advanced sensors, all set to replace the Rafale and Eurofighter by 2040. Running in parallel, the Tempest project, led by the UK, Italy, and Japan, aims to produce a rival 6th-gen jet with similar capabilities. These aren't just prestige projects, they're about strategic independence. Europe's also investing heavily in its missile defense architecture. NATO's integrated air and missile defense is being expanded, while Germany's European Sky Shield initiative, launched in 2022, seeks to create a layered air defense network across the continent. With over 20 nations now signed on, it is one of the most ambitious air defense efforts in European history. Under the surface, European nations are boosting undersea warfare capabilities. The Nord Stream sabotage showed just how vulnerable seabed infrastructure can be. So NATO and the EU navies have ramped up investments in seabed surveillance, anti-submarine warfare, and unmanned underwater drones. This isn't just about guarding against Russian submarines, it's about protecting the digital arteries that keep Europe's economy alive. Tanks, jets, and battle groups might dominate the headlines, but wars aren't won by militaries alone. They're won by societies that can absorb a punch and keep on functioning. In Europe's emerging security doctrine, civil preparedness is no longer an afterthought. It's a pillar of deterrence. From food and fuel reserves to crisis communication plans, countries are waking up to the reality that resilience on the home front may just be as important as firepower on the front lines. Because in a modern conflict, your greatest vulnerability isn't always on the battlefield, it's in a blackout, the hospital queue, or the disinformation feed. First and foremost, Europe must prioritize its ability to keep the lights on. Europe's energy grid, once heavily dependent on Russian gas, is now being restructured for resilience. Countries are diversifying supply chains, building out liquefied natural gas terminals, and stockpiling fuel reserves. Norway has increased offshore patrols around its pipelines, and countries like Germany and the Netherlands are investing in decentralized, renewable-based power systems that are harder to sabotage. Communications security is another priority. Governments are securing their 5G infrastructure against foreign interference, protecting satellite networks, and building out redundancies for internet and radio services. The European Union's new Cyber Resilience Act mandates tougher security standards for everything, from routers to smart grids. Transportation networks, often overlooked, are now under scrutiny. Rail hubs, ports, and logistics corridors are being hardened, both against cyber and physical attacks. The EU's military mobility effort doubles as a public works project, ensuring that not just tanks, but food, medicine, and critical goods can move swiftly during a crisis. Across the continent, dusty civil defense manuals are being pulled off the shelves and rewritten for the age of hybrid war. Countries like Sweden and Finland are leading the way, reviving Cold War-era civil defense programs that treat every citizen as part of the national effort. Finland's famous bunkers, stocked with food and medical supplies, are matched by detailed plans for maintaining social services in wartime. Emergency response planning is being retooled to address the multi-domain threats, power outages combined with cyber attacks, mass refugee flows combined with disinformation, or even biothreats layered into conventional crises. Governments are running scenario-based drills involving not just the military, but hospitals, school, transportation agencies, and local governments. Behind the scenes, supply chain security has become a quiet obsession. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed how vulnerable Europe was to disruptions in medical supplies, semiconductors, and even basic pharmaceuticals. Now strategic stockpiles are being rebuilt, domestic production incentivized, and key imports diversified, especially in sectors like food, energy, and medical equipment. But no strategy works if the...
Speaking of food, I don't know if any of you guys heard the term victory garden, but Google it. It's going to be a useful thing in a few years, that's for sure.
Public is unprepared, and that's why public awareness is now a battlefield all its own. Crisis preparedness education is seeing a quiet resurgence. Sweden has mailed every household a prepare for crisis or war guidebook, covering everything from first aid to spotting misinformation. Other countries are launching school programs, public workshops, and emergency app campaigns to keep citizens informed and ready. One of the newest tools in the playbook is disinformation resistance training. Countries like Lithuania and Estonia have pioneered public campaigns that teach citizens how to verify sources, recognize bots, and identify coordinated influence operations. In an era where panic can be sparked by a single viral tweet, this kind of digital literacy is as crucial as any physical defense.
Like even with AI today, like the 1 year ago we had the shrimp cheeses, now we've got all the other like the new AI, or what do they call them? Not frameworks. The new generation of AI is able to make videos that are actually indistinguishable from real videos. I've had so many AI ads right now with just AI generated people that look so real and they sound so real that most people will not be able to tell that it's actually AI.
Governments are even revisiting national service models, not just military but civil. Germany is debating a return to mandatory service that could include roles in healthcare, logistics, or emergency response. France and Denmark are piloting volunteer corps that can be activated during national emergencies. The message is simple: national defense is no longer just the job of the military, it's everyone's responsibility. Hard power still matters, but future conflicts will be shaped by silicon as much as steel. To stay ahead, Europe isn't just preparing for war, it's investing in the technologies that could define it. AI, for one, is no longer science fiction. It's embedded in command systems, drone swarms, and battlefield simulations. European defense industries are scrambling to catch up with the US and Chinese advances, pouring resources into AI
We're
applications.
so behind on all of that stuff here in Europe. It's nice to see that there's actually a push now to kind of reindustrialize the continent. Like, I personally do not trust any outside power. No offense, but everyone's gonna be out for their own fucking skin. And if shit hits the fan again and Russia invades Europe, I'm not 100% sure that the US is going to give us enough help anymore. They might send us some food or maybe some weapons, but even then, the weapons, we don't even want to buy the weapons from them anymore. As said in the video, we are trying to reindustrialize in that way as well. And with Donald Trump being so disruptive to outside governments like Europe, it's easy to see how the US would do what they did before World War II happened, which was the doctrine of isolation, right? It was after the I would need to do some more research. I have very limited knowledge on that, but I know that more or less what happened was after the Great Depression, the economy went so shit that the US just isolated themselves economically from the outside world, mostly. Of course, there was always going to be some trade, but it's one of the reasons why. And there was the big anti-war sentiment as well after the Great War. And it's why they didn't join until they got attacked by Japan. And if Japan didn't attack the US, there's a good chance that World War II would have went a totally different direction. The US might have not even gotten involved in the conflict until later, when it was too late. Now that's all speculation, because they did see the Japanese seeing them. They've seen the Japanese as a threat already, with the expansionism they did in China and all the islands around, especially since the Philippines were a US dominion. And once the Japanese attacked them now, that kind of pushed them to get involved. Of course, the priority was the Pearl Harbor and Philippines and the Pacific. But because of the alliance that Hitler had with Japan, they got pulled into it a lot faster than they wanted to. They were not ready for war when, in 1942, I think it was, when Pearl Harbor happened. I say that, but they weren't as ready as they wanted to be. No, they were definitely a lot more powerful than all the other countries, like England, which was scrambling for resources until the US joined. They did have a lot of their dominions that worked with the UK, but the fact that there was so many U-boats around the Atlantic, it was really hard. It was really easy to disrupt that kind of supply line. Although by the end of the war, especially with the decryption of Enigma, right? It was all just kind of like light breezing once you knew where the U-boats are going to be. but it was still pretty devastating. And yeah, so catching up now, trying to catch up to where we're basically in the point where the US were when the war started. Also, when where France was when World War II started, or even England, because no one was getting ready for war after World War One. Just no one wanted another war in Europe, and so no one was arming up. And now we're kind of in the same situation again, with a big threat on our border, and we're just not prepared for it as much as we should. But I believe that we'll be able to fight them off, even if they push in a little bit. Right now, you've got Ukraine defending us, right? If Ukraine would have fallen already, the way that Putin wanted it to fall, I think that he would have pushed on into Poland. He would have pushed on into Lithuania and Estonia, because he would if he succeeded as he wanted, which was the 3-day or whatever the invasion was supposed to be. He would not have stopped. There's no way that he would have stopped.
That range from predictive maintenance to real-time battlefield analytics. Initiatives like the EU's Coordinated Plan on AI and the European Defence Agency's AI Action Plan aim to consolidate research and fast-track military adoption. Countries like France and Germany are also funding national-level defence AI labs. And in the UK, the Ministry of Defence is pushing ahead with human-machine teaming trials involving swarms of autonomous drones alongside special forces. But Europe isn't racing ahead blindly.
It's like, my God, like, I'm 30 years old, right? So I'm not gonna be on the top of the list for conscription. But if it gets bad enough, I'm gonna have to go and fight as well. If the whole conflict actually escalates, of course. That's just all theoretical, but I'm afraid that the way everything is going, and China hasn't done their move yet, you know, and even though China and Russia doesn't like each other, they will have the same enemies as each other. And once China does their move on Taiwan, then the US will need to get involved. And now they don't need to, they could just let them fucking get invaded, but we'd be losing 60% of the world's chips being produced there, and also a lot of money and gold is going to be seized by the Chinese government, which will give them a huge boost to the war effort. I'm actually gonna Google this right now. I know it's a huge number. 422 tons. So that's 422,000 kilograms. And let me just calculate gold to euro. So 95,000 per kilo. God damn. Okay, that's gonna be a huge number. So 95,000, I'm just gonna round up. That's 95,000. Multiply by, was it that 422,000? Multiply by 422,000. That is 40 billion euros, not dollars. That's 40 billion euros, which is about $50 billion. Just there, lying like that. You know, you wouldn't think that it's a lot, but it's enough to this will buy. You know how much is a modern Chinese jet or even better tank. Let's go for tank because they're gonna be using tanks mostly. Price. So you're looking at, they have T-90 still and T-72s, which are So a T90 is 4.5 million. And you've got 40 billion euros. So this is in dollars. So now multiply that by what's the euro to dollar? Multiply it by 1.13. Okay, sorry, I was way off. It's $45 billion. So that is wait, take out that's 45,000 tanks they can afford with just the gold they will seize from Taiwan. And then you have the infrastructure of creating chips and all of that. So they wouldn't use all the gold for spending, of course, since you need gold to create chips and stuff like that. But you know, if you look at this and it gets kind of scary. Oh god, I don't want. Yes, ad block. Just. I understand. So it's between 2.6 to $10 million per tank, depending on what the kind of tank it is, and modern Chinese destroyer. Right, that's gonna be way more expensive now. Price. And it's also, I'm assuming that the numbers we're getting here are all going to be just guessed on. They like estimated what they actually cost. So there's a destroyer, $900 million. That's 40. Yeah, that's 45. There's the other 35 destroyers that will fund that, and that can be a real game changer. Now, prices of resources will change depending on how everything goes, of course. But China does have a lot of they've got so much power around in Africa right now that I don't think they'll be worried about resources too much too early on, until you'll have the NATO maybe trying to disturb the trade in some way. But then if we do, that's gonna have a big backlash from African countries as well, because you know they're gonna lose business. So yeah, well that's kind of that. And I need to run to the bathroom. I'll finish this video and then
ethical considerations play a major role, perhaps more so than with other global powers. The EU's forthcoming AI Act includes clauses that directly impact autonomous weapon systems, reinforcing the principle that humans must retain control over life or death.
Oh yeah, speaking of the drones, it's gonna be fucking terrifying, right? Like, imagine, all you can hear is a drone, and you're dead. Like, there's nothing you can do about it. Especially if there's gonna be 5 of them. Like, there's nothing, you can try and shoot it down, but at that point, just, you might as well throw away the equipment so it doesn't get destroyed and someone else picks it up, so the next soldier can use it.
Decisions. This tension between innovation and restraint will shape how far and how fast European AI can be militarized. Space, once a peaceful frontier, is now a contested domain.
That is going to be huge. Having space, having airspace control. It used to be airspace. Now it's oh god, what will I even call it? Outer airspace. Anyway, keeping control over our sky so high up is going to be so important, especially with technologies like what Elon Musk is doing, right? Imagine this, right? Right now it's kind of like a big theory thing. Imagine you get yourself one of the starships, right? And you want to invade, you want to disturb, you want to paradrop, in a sense, into enemy territory. If you're using a rocket, it's a lot harder to stop you from doing that. It also makes it easier, faster, and you probably don't even need to land that fucking thing. You just need to get into a right altitude and slow down enough. But that's probably gonna be a lot more difficult. But let's just say they land the actual rocket, and you've got a task force that comes out. It's going to be mainly infantry, of course, and or even drones. You don't even need infantry in that fucking thing. You just get a rocket, you send it with drones inside, and the drones just do cause chaos. Like, imagine, like, why? Because everyone is always like, oh, you nuclear weapons, they're just gonna nuke you. Why risk getting nuked yourself if all you have to do is just send some drones in a rocket that's gonna land itself near a city, like near Berlin, let's say. It's expensive, but depending on what the mission is supposed to accomplish, it could have its benefits. Of course, just disrupting for the sake of killing some civilians is not going to be worth it because of how expensive the actual launch is going to be, but I can see that being used in this war.
European security officials understand that GPS signals, early warning systems, and encrypted communications all rely on satellites, and that those satellites are increasingly at risk. In response, Europe is investing in satellite constellation protection, building redundancy into communications networks, and deploying tech to detect and evade jamming or spoofing. France has already established a space command, and the European Space Agency is working with NATO to monitor space traffic and protect orbital assets. The growth of space situational awareness, essentially keeping track of what's flying above Earth, is another focus area. EU-funded programs are mapping orbital debris, tracking satellites, and monitoring potential threats. In 2022, Germany launched a new space surveillance radar system, while Italy and Spain are developing small satellite constellations designed to improve real-time observation. And Europe is thinking about counter-space capabilities too. These include everything from cyber tools targeting enemy satellites to co-orbital technologies that can inspect or disable rival systems without blowing them up. Quietly, Europe is preparing for a future where wars may begin with a blackout in orbit. Protecting critical infrastructure remains a top priority. Following attacks on hospitals, rail networks, and pipelines, countries are tightening regulations on cybersecurity for both public and private sectors. The EU's updated NIS2 directive mandates higher security standards across essential industries, from energy and transport to healthcare and water. Underlying all of this is a push for digital sovereignty. Europe aims to reduce reliance on foreign tech providers, especially from China and the US.
Yeah, I think it's time to create a European social media, a European YouTube, and in general just disconnect ourselves from the outside world. Well, not disconnect, but have something that's going to be internal instead of external. Imagine like, I don't know, they cut the cables to the US, and there goes Facebook, there goes any sort of communication, Viber, all of those fucking things would be gone. How are you going to text? Like, you still have your phone, right? But most people will use, what are they called? The texting apps, not the actual SMS. I don't even have enough credit to send messages. I just get internet and free calls, and that's it.
US. Initiatives like Gaia X aim to create...
And the point I'm trying to make here is that yes, you can text your family, but whatever you want to have an organized warning. Now, countries have the automated messages, but when it comes to actual individuals trying to organize, let's say there was a bomb strike in your neighborhood, and the neighborhood wants to make sure that everyone knows what happened, that they need help, and how do you do that if you don't have a social media that you can connect to?
Secure European-controlled cloud infrastructure. At the same time, defense ministries are funding indigenous cybersecurity startups and building secure communication systems that don't pass through foreign servers.
Yeah,
Europe is more prepared for
exactly
conflicts
what I was
today
thinking about.
than at any point since the Cold War. But readiness remains uneven. Frontline states like Poland and Finland are racing ahead, while others lag in military investment or civil preparedness.
Polska górą.
Key gaps persist in air defense, joint logistics, and cyber resilience, and political fractures from defense spending disputes to divergent threat perceptions continue to complicate unity. Going forward, Europe must walk a fine line between credible deterrence and strategic dialogue. Strength deters aggression, but diplomacy still has a role in managing escalation and avoiding miscalculation. The challenge lies in staying firm without stumbling into the very war Europe hopes to prevent. History has shown that peace is rarely preserved by hope alone. In the 1930s, the warning signs were there, but too many chose to look away. Today, the signs are flashing once more. The question is, will Europe act in time? Do you think Europe can defend itself without the US? Which country would take charge? Let us know your thoughts.
So which country will take charge? Whoever has the biggest military. So hopefully we can come to an agreement, and hopefully, what I would like to see happen is, all of the generals from the countries will meet together and they choose the marshal, the field marshal, not field marshal, what are they called? I'm actually not sure what would that rank be called, but whoever would be the main de facto organizer of all military operations, because otherwise, if we don't, we're kind of fucked. If you don't organize every single military action together. So you need one guy, you need one person that's going to be the head of this, like, European Pentagon, basically. And then everyone else has to fall in underneath them. Of course, everyone's gonna want to be the one, so that's gonna be the usual fucking bullshit of European lack of unity. But hopefully it's not gonna happen. Hopefully that once shit hits the fan, we won't be fighting each other and we'll just try and get together to do something about it. And now I'm going to go for a little break. I need to go to the bathroom and maybe make myself some tea because my throat is fucking killing me. No viewers just yet, so it's all good. see. Okay. Video number 2. Now that's getting interesting as well. There's a bigger support for sending stuff over to Ukraine.
Here Europe has stepped up after Russians outright refused to make any deal on a ceasefire with Ukraine. After countless warnings, Europe is now rapidly arming Ukraine to the teeth, leaving Ukrainian armed forces better prepared for the now inevitable Russian summer offensive. Recently, the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, outright refused a ceasefire with Ukraine during a press conference with Russian media. He stated that they had tried to implement a ceasefire before but failed, and will never do it again under any circumstances other than effective capitulation. Notably, according to President Zelensky and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, of which Russia is a member, Russia and Russian-backed separatists have violated all of the various 25 ceasefires signed since 2014. Earlier, the European Union stated that if Russia were to refuse any form of a ceasefire or serious efforts to make peace, it would implement a massive sanctions package targeting Russian economic and military assets. The package includes additional sanctions against 189 new Russian shadow oil fleet vessels, bringing the total number of sanctioned vessels to 342. The 17th EU sanctions package also includes 31 new companies providing direct or indirect support to Russia's military industry, such as those producing crucial technologies and chips needed for Russian missiles and other weapon systems. More than just sanctions, European countries have significantly stepped up their game, investing large amounts into their own and Ukraine's military industries. Ukraine has received over 1 billion euros from the EU, made from profits generated from frozen Russian assets, helping to support Ukraine's economy and wartime industry as it continues to defend itself over 3 years into the full-scale Russian invasion. With artillery playing a significant role in offensive and defensive operations, the UK has officially transferred their entire stockpile AS-90 self-propelled howitzers to Ukraine. Additionally, French President Emmanuel Macron has confirmed that all French Caesar self-propelled howitzers produced this
IS-90s are so fucking terrifying. Holy
year
fuck.
will also be sent to Ukraine, translating to more than 200 French and British self-propelled guns in 2025 alone. Additionally, the French foreign minister added that all profits generated from frozen Russian assets seized by France will be used to produce spare parts and equipment for the Caesar guns sent to Ukraine.
Lol. Isn't that
This
a big
will
fuck
ensure
you?
that
I like
Ukraine
that.
can continue to operate them, even through high fire rates. Lastly, over 2/3 of the EU's promised 2 million artillery shells have already been gathered in the first 6 months of the year. Europe and the countries it sources these munitions from are outproducing even the previously set goals, indicating a positive trend for additional deliveries in the future. Regardless, the current deliveries of shells, high-tech artillery guns, and spare parts will ensure that Ukraine can maintain an extraordinarily high fire rate as it prepares to defend against the inevitable Russian summer offensive. To combat Russian airstrike capabilities, Ukraine is set to receive all 6 promised Norwegian F-16 fighter jets
Nice.
by the end of 2025, and Belgium donating 2 F-16s to use as spare parts.
Oh,
Additionally,
let's go.
footage captured
Okay,
of a
that's
German
very
train
good.
convoy shows at least 10 more Gepard self-propelled air defense systems en route to the Ukrainian border. As Germany has halted public disclosures of its military aid deliveries to Ukraine, the real number is likely much higher.
I mean, it's
These
you have
weapon
to-
systems
at
will
this
be
point
able
you
to
have
combat Russian drone and missile strikes from the air and from the ground, continuously increasing Ukraine's defensive capabilities as Russia aims to do the same with its number of strikes. Overall, with Russia openly rejecting any ceasefire and continuing its offensive plans, Europe has responded with unprecedented unity and urgency, arming Ukraine at an increasing rate. Massive sanctions have been unleashed on Russia's shadow oil fleet and military industry, while billions from frozen Russian assets are now flowing directly into Ukraine's defense and wartime economy. Key European allies are transferring entire arsenals of self-propelled artillery, spare parts and ammunition, ensuring Ukraine can sustain high fire rates and repel the inevitable Russian summer offensive. With further
this year is
F-16
gonna
and
be
Gepard
interesting.
deliveries underway, European
I wonder if he's going to make the move on Lithuania now. Since he knows that he can't postpone, he can't keep what's it called? Oh god, delaying it anymore, right? Because he's been delaying it since like the peace talks started, and this is the time when like people are like, okay, he's not going to do anything about this. He's not going to do a ceasefire. He doesn't want peace. He just wants to keep on pushing. So I wonder if he's going to make another move now.
production lines are increasingly geared toward Ukraine's survival. The message is clear: if Russia won't stop this war, Europe will make sure Ukraine can win it. If you are against the invasion of Ukraine and you want to support the work that I'm doing, consider subscribing to our own independent news website. Here you can find our exclusive strategic insights, comprehensive overviews of all fronts, and regular tactical analysis videos. By subscribing, you will not only show your support for this
Very
channel, but also
Next up, the new permissions for Ukraine to strike inside Russia, and that one is big. That is
The
actually
green
huge.
light to strike inside Russia. Not just occupied Ukrainian territory, inside actual Russian territory. For Putin, this changes everything. On May 26th, Germany's new chancellor stood in front of the cameras
This is one the other reason why I'm trying to say, like, he might feel the pressure now. He might start making moves in the north, like near Estonia, Lithuania. Just because he's now like, okay, shit, now they're actually doing we're actually doing something about this war, instead of just kind of being like, oh, we want peace. And he was using that. He was like an abusive boyfriend that is telling you that he loves you and everything after you fight, but really he just wants to keep going with the
and
abuse.
said it plainly. There are no longer any range restrictions. The US, UK, France, and Germany are done holding back. That means Russia's air bases, weapons depots, and command centers, once considered untouchable, are now fair game. And the Kremlin, it's panicking. So what weapons can Ukraine now unleash on Russian soil? And how could this escalate the war or finally tip it? Let's break it down. This means that Ukraine can now defend itself, for example, by attacking military positions in Russia, with very few exceptions. It didn't do that until recently. It can now do that. The news may come as a surprise to those who remember that the UK and US allowed Ukraine to use their long-range missiles to strike Russian targets back in November of last year. The former allowed Ukraine to use Storm Shadow, with the latter permitting Ukraine to use ATACMS missiles to attack Russia. The key difference lies in the specific kinds of targets Ukraine was allowed to hit back in November. Yes, it could hit Russian positions with its Western missiles. However, those Russian positions either had to be inside occupied Ukrainian territory or at best in the border regions where Putin was preparing attacks against Ukraine. That meant Ukraine couldn't, for example, use a Storm Shadow to attack a military base deeper inside Russia that provided no immediate threat to Ukraine, but can. And Putin is terrified. We know that much from the Kremlin's response to the news. Rather than attempting to shrug it off, Russia has come out to say that the decision made by Ukraine's Western allies is both dangerous and detrimental to any efforts those allies are attempting to make to help Ukraine and Russia reach a peace agreement. Putin's
Oh my god, I swear to god, like, I can't believe they actually said that.
of peace, Dmitry
my fucking
Peskov,
God.
outlined Russia's response. If these decisions have indeed been made, Peskov said, they are completely at odds with our aspirations for a political settlement. That's a veiled twofold warning from the Kremlin. Russia appears to be threatening to pull out of peace talks, using Ukraine's new ability to use Western-made long-range missiles as its leverage. Worse yet, Peskov is implying that Russia may be forced to escalate the Ukraine war further as a response. We'll discuss what that may mean later in the video. In truth, the West's decision shouldn't come as a surprise. It comes on the back of Russia launching its largest
it's so
series of
scary,
drone
isn't it?
strikes against Ukraine yet. Also on May 26th, The Guardian reported that Russia had engaged in 3 consecutive nights of drone strikes against Ukraine, killing at least 6 people in the process. The night of the 26th offered up the worst of it, with Russia sending a record-breaking 355 of its Iran-supplied Shahed drones to Ukraine, along with 9 of its cruise missiles. Ukraine's
Oh, I wonder whose side Iran is on.
Air Force spokesperson Yuri Ignat confirmed the attack was the largest drone strike Russia had launched against Ukraine since Putin started his full-scale invasion in February 2022. The response to Russia's escalation was immediate, with US President Donald Trump lambasting Putin for his decision. Something has happened to him. He's gone absolutely crazy, Trump blared on his Truth Social platform. I've always said he wants all of Ukraine, not just a piece of it. And maybe that's proving to be right, but if he does, it will lead to the downfall of Russia. While that post may be encouraging to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky from the perspective of Ukraine receiving more US support, Trump didn't leave Zelensky out of his response. He claimed that Ukraine's leader is doing his country no favors by talking the way he does. Everything out of his mouth causes problems. I don't like it, and it better stop. The Kremlin subtly mocked Trump for his statements. It claimed that Trump's words were the result of an emotional overload, suggesting that Putin is still trying to manipulate Trump to his agenda. France's President Emmanuel Macron took a different approach, noting that he believes Trump now realizes that Putin is playing him and that the anger Trump is expressing on social media translates
playing
into
everyone,
action.
or was.
That appears to be precisely what happened. The US, along with 3 other countries, has lifted restrictions on how Ukraine uses the long-range missiles provided to it by the West. Is that an escalation? Perhaps. But Russia showed on Monday that it's already escalating its aerial strikes, making the decision by the 4 nations as much as a response to Putin's aggression as anything else. After all, Putin is being a hypocrite. He's claiming that Ukraine attacking Russia on its own territory will slow down peace talks out of one side of his mouth, while remaining silent over Russia's constant attacks on Ukraine out of the other side. Coming back to Germany and Merz's comments, the German Chancellor offered a justification for his country's decision. He says that Ukraine can only be placed in a position to properly defend itself if the country's allies finally stop holding it back. We call it in the jargon long-range fire, which is to say to equip Ukraine with weapons with which it can strike at military goals beyond its borders, Merz said. Germany's Chancellor also pointed out that Ukraine will use its missiles far differently from Russia. He says the decisive difference between the military leadership of the aggressor, Russia, and Ukraine, whilst the latter has military goals in its sights, Russia is targeting civilians. Therein lies the real reason why the West is finally lifting its restrictions on Ukraine. Too many Ukrainian civilians are being killed by a Russian leader who pretends that he wants peace. With these missiles, Ukraine can finally start attacking the facilities Russia uses to build and store these weapons that Putin is using to kill the country's people. As for Putin's talk about this escalation slowing the wheels of peace, Merz simply had this to say. After the last 3 weeks, no one can seriously accuse us of not having exhausted all available diplomatic means. If even an offer to meet at the Vatican does not get Putin's approval, then we must be prepared for this war to last longer than we all wish or can imagine, Merz said. In other words, the West now knows for sure that Putin was simply delaying peace talks so he could continue his assaults against Ukraine. Now Russia's leader is about to find out what that gets him. Ukraine isn't about to raise the white flag. Instead, it's now in a position where it can hit Russia where it really hurts. The question is simple. What weapons does Ukraine have from the West that it can use to strike Russian targets inside Russia itself? The answer, at least from Germany, still isn't clear. Despite all of his exclamations, Merz still wouldn't be drawn on whether Germany would be providing any of its powerful Taurus missiles to Ukraine. Little seems to have changed for Germany in that regard. Its former Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, flat out refused to provide Taurus to Ukraine, believing that doing so would escalate the war. Merz claimed that he would deliver those missiles if he came to office. However, Merz has been a little more cautious with his rhetoric since becoming Germany's chancellor. He has his reasons, he claims. Merz notes that Putin speaks German fluently, so any messages that Merz delivers publicly need to be carefully considered so they don't give too much away to Russia's leader. In other words, Merz doesn't want Putin and his cronies to figure out what Ukraine is capable of doing simply by watching a TV interview. Reading between the lines, these statements tell us that Germany is likely on the verge of delivering Taurus to Ukraine. It just isn't ready to tell anybody. So if Taurus is coming to Ukraine, what does that missile deliver now that Ukraine has no usage restrictions? A modular air-launched cruise missile, Taurus was conceived in the 1990s and entered service in 2005. Since then, there have been multiple variations of the missile, including the
That is huge, what the fuck?
Taurus KEPD 350, which is the original, a shorter range Taurus KEPD 150, and even versions that have been configured for use by other militaries. It's likely to be the Taurus KEPD 350 that Ukraine will receive from Germany, and that missile is terrifying to Putin. Germany's cruise missile has a sleek and streamlined design that's intended to make it difficult to spot by enemy radars, while also improving the weapon's aerodynamic efficiency. It measures 16.7 feet long and weighs a little over 3,200 pounds, suggesting a substantial payload that's capable of devastating the protected 200 aerodynamic efficiency. It measures 16.7 feet long and weighs a little over 3,200 pounds.
So about 1,500 kilos.
Suggesting a substantial payload that's capable of devastating the protected structures Russia uses to guard its missile stockpiles. Taurus comes packed with Germany's Mephisto penetrator warhead, which is a two-stage tandem warhead designed to dig its way into protected structures. The idea is simple. Mephisto's first stage, also known as its pre-charge, creates a breach in a target's defenses, including armor and solid concrete. That breach offers a gap large enough for the second stage, which comprises a high-energy explosive charge, to enter the target itself. Once there, the second stage detonates from the inside of the target,
so it's sort of like a heat round,
ensuring maximum damage. In practice, this makes Taurus similar to the Javelin missiles Ukraine has used so effectively to take out Russia's tanks. However, Mephisto is far more special than that. Army Recognition says the warhead has both void sensing and layer counting technology built in. What that means is that Mephisto can figure out whether it's reached the appropriate point for a detonation. For instance, let's assume that Ukraine uses a Taurus to strike a 3-story weapons storage facility. The weapons themselves are on the bottom floor, with the top 2 floors being administrative area. With its layer counting tech, Mephisto knows how to break through the top 2 floors of the structure to reach the weapons on the bottom floor before it detonates. That means Putin can't hide Ukraine's most desired targets away. He can bury them, he can hide them in multi-story buildings. None of it will matter, because Mephisto is smart enough to make its way through any barriers Russia attempts to create so it can destroy its target. Of course, this sheer destructive force wouldn't mean much if the Taurus missile wasn't capable of striking targets at long range and at speed. Taurus has both these issues covered. The missile is capable of moving at just shy of the speed of sound, hitting a maximum speed of Mach 0.9. While that's not quite fast enough to completely outpace Russia's air defense systems, it will likely do the job if Ukraine combines its Taurus strikes with decoy drones sent to confuse those defenses. On the range front, Taurus can travel up to 310 miles before touching down on its target. That means that it has one of the longest ranges of any Western-supplied missiles Ukraine has, which naturally opens up more opportunities for attacks. Russia can't even rely on jamming technology to send the Taurus off course. Germany's missile combines GPS and an inertial navigation system, or INS, to find its way during its mid-course trajectory. A terrain-referenced navigation system also allows Taurus to plot a course to its target in which it won't confront air defense systems. Plus, as the missile enters its terminal guidance phase, an infrared seeker activates, that ensures it can identify and engage its target while fending off any Russian attempts to jam the missile's GPS. All told, Taurus is a powerful missile that rightly has Putin running scared. But even if Germany doesn't hand that missile over just yet, Russia's military installations aren't safe. The lifting of restrictions by the US, UK, and France means that Russia now also has to deal with ATACMS and Storm Shadow. ATACMS, which is made by the US, is a short-range tactical ballistic missile, though that still means it has a solid range in the context of how Ukraine wants to use it. It measures 13 feet long, making it larger than the Taurus, and can weigh up to 3,700 pounds, depending on the variant. It's fast, too, capable of hitting speeds of Mach 3, which means it can avoid many of Russia's air defense systems. Guided by a combination of GPS and INS, the missile has a top range of 186 miles, so it can't quite travel as far as Germany's Taurus, but it packs an even more explosive punch against its target. Storm Shadow, or Scalp to give the missile its French name, is just as dangerous. The export version of the missile has a maximum range of 155 miles, though it's possible that Ukraine has received the domestic versions of the missile that are capable of reaching twice that distance. The missile comes packed with a 992-pound Broach warhead, which stands for Bomb Royal Ordnance Augmented Charge. Like Mephisto, this warhead uses a two-stage approach to first penetrate a target's outer layer before sending explosive destruction into the target itself. Storm Shadow can travel at speeds of up to Mach 0.95 depending on its altitude, and again like the Taurus, it's a cruise missile fired from a fighter jet. Assuming Ukraine receives the Taurus, it's going to get a trio of missiles it can use to hit Russia hard. Here's what that means for the Ukraine war. First, more targets are now open to Ukraine than ever before. Merz made that clear with his announcement, adding that lifting restrictions on these missiles will make the decisive difference in Ukraine's war. Why? Well, Merz explained that too, saying, "A country that can only oppose an attacker on its own territory is not defending itself adequately. The implication here is that Ukraine can defend itself far better if it can hit Russian targets inside Russia itself."
Yes, the best defense is a good offense, as they say.
That ability opens up opportunities for Ukraine to take out Russian ammunition depots, logistical centers, and even entire military bases, which in turn relieves pressure on the areas of Ukraine Putin is currently Back in August 2024, the Institute for the Study of War, or ISW, highlighted just how many targets are now in Ukraine's crosshairs. Back then, the ISW said that Ukraine's ATACMS gave it the ability to hit at least 245 Russian targets, including 16 air bases. That alone is massive. Russia uses its air bases to launch devastating glide bombs at Ukraine's cities and infrastructure. Having the ability to take those bases out of commission would be huge for Ukraine. We also can't ignore the fact that Taurus, assuming it's coming to Ukraine, offers over 100 miles more range than ATACMS. We don't know for certain how many more Russian bases and military structures that larger range opens up as targets. But the takeaway here is that several hundred of Putin's most valuable military assets now face a massive threat. The lifting of long-range missile restrictions also means that Ukraine can finally hit Russia hard in response to the many attacks Putin has ordered against Ukraine's cities. Merz suggested himself when noting the difference between Ukraine and Russia's strategies. Germany's chancellor said that Russia ruthlessly attacks civilian targets, bombing cities, kindergartens, hospitals, and elderly care homes. Ukraine does not do this, and we attach great importance to keeping it that way. Merz isn't wrong. The massive drone strike we mentioned earlier in Kyiv is just the tip of the iceberg for Putin's brutal civilian targeting strategy. Russia's attempts to create terror inside Ukraine have so far led to its missiles, drones, and glide bombs, killing at least 13,134 civilians between February 24, 2022 and April 30, 2025. Of those more than 13,000 dead, 701 are children. Russia's terrible attacks have also injured 31,867 people, including 2,032 children. Therein lies the secondary goal of permitting Ukraine to attack Russian targets inside Russia with Western long-range missiles. Yet those attacks on Russia's bases and ammunition stockpiles will relieve pressure on Ukraine's frontline forces. However, they'll also minimize Putin's ability to target people who aren't even involved in the fighting. The missiles aren't a cure-all for Putin's civilian targeting approach. However, they're powerful enough to make it much harder for Russia's leader to terrorize Ukrainian civilians as often as he has. There's only one thing that Ukraine and the West have to worry about: potential Russian escalation. Peskov has already indicated that the combined decision by Germany, the US, the UK, and France is a major blow to peace talks. In truth, none will take that threat seriously. Putin has done everything in his power to avoid creating a ceasefire agreement or any form of peace treaty that doesn't call for the total eradication of Ukraine as a sovereign entity. Despite the best efforts of the US and Ukraine, peace doesn't seem any more likely an option now than it was before Trump became the US president. More worrying, at least for the West, is that the decision to lift restrictions means Russia may start accusing the four countries involved of direct participation in the Ukraine war. Moscow hinted at that likelihood when it warned that Germany allowing Ukraine to use Taurus to strike Russia's transport infrastructure could amount to this direct participation. Given these statements, we have to consider something important: Russia's nuclear doctrine. When the US first permitted Ukraine to use ATACMS to strike Russian targets in occupied Ukrainian territory, Putin responded by signing into law a new Russian nuclear doctrine. Among the tweaks Russia made was the inclusion of language suggesting that Russia could now respond with nuclear weapons to the launch of ballistic missiles attacking the territory of the Russian Federation and/or its allies. ATACMS is a ballistic missile. Russia also claims that it can now target a country that uses conventional weapons that threaten its sovereignty, which covers Storm Shadow and the Taurus. But most worrying of all, Russia's new nuclear doctrine says that it can use nuclear weapons both against the country attacking it and any country providing its opponents with the means to hit Russia's territory. Translation: Russia's doctrine says it can escalate to nuclear warfare against Ukraine and its allies if missiles like Taurus and ATACMS are used on Russian territory.
If he does
now,
that,
saying that this could happen and actually following through on it are two very different things.
Yes,
Putin
exactly.
knows that the US, UK, and France all have nuclear arsenals with which they would respond to any Russian nuclear strike. Still, it's the threat of escalation that's more concerning. The signing of this new nuclear doctrine was intended to intimidate Ukraine's allies into backing away from allowing Putin's enemy to use their missiles on its territory. That threat worked for a few months, but now Germany, the US, the UK, and France have decided the benefits of permitting Ukraine to hit Russia with long-range missiles far outweigh the risks. That decision may change the entire...
At this point, it's kind of like he's been threatening all of this for so long, delaying all of the peace talks, violating the peace talks by attacking the Ukrainians while there was a ceasefire going on. And he's basically doing what Hitler did before World War II, which is give false promises and then don't follow through on them. So that's why I was like thinking like the next move is going to be Lithuania, since he realizes now that his bluff is called. He needs to make the next move. So the pawn is taken. Actually, this will be more like a knight. He put the knight out, right? A scary piece, but it got taken because there was a bluff that he's going to do anything with it. So let's look into the EU's 150 billion defense boost.
Hello, everybody, and good evening. I'm Don Arleth, and you're watching World News Tonight, coming to you live from Warsaw here on TVP World. 150 billion euro for arms procurement. That's the size of the pie for SAFE, or Security Action for Europe, a new fund where member states will be able to borrow money for weapons. On Tuesday, the Council of the European Union finally gave the initiative the green light. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first, the latest headlines. Brussels showdown. Will Hungary have its EU voting rights suspended? Gdansk goes galactic. EU Space Days 2025 blasts off. And a Pole wanted for causing deadly car crash extradited to Poland.
That one I'm not so interested in.
Tens of billions of euro are set to kickstart European defense capabilities under the EU's Security Action for Europe plan, or SAFE. According to Polish Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, Poland stands to receive about 150 billion zloty of the low-interest loan, or about a fifth of the entire package. This comes as the Minister of Defense is in Washington, meeting with U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. Susanna Jurek has the details.
Defense and rearmament was on everyone's minds on both sides of the Atlantic on Tuesday. Just as the Polish Defense Minister Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz discussed defense spending as part of the NATO alliance with the US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth in Washington,
Poland is proud to set an example. We are a NATO leader in defense spending, reaching nearly 5% of GDP.
We don't have to encourage Poland. You are almost there already, leading the way on investment in Europe's largest land army, modernizing that force, and the defense industrial base, which is critically important.
The Council of the European Union is stepping up, having formally adopted the Security Action for Europe, or SAFE, a major new initiative designed to facilitate joint procurement and long-term investment in the bloc's defense industry. Its key points include:
finances urgent and large-scale investments in the European defense technological and industrial base, aims to boost production capacity. Through SAFE, the EU will provide up to 150 billion euro, distributed based on demand and national plans. Funds will be distributed through competitively priced, long-maturity loans.
It's like a subsidized credit. So it's positive, but it's very important to understand that this is not a game changer. It's not a game changer for European industry. It's not a game changer for rearmament programs.
Loans will be offered at a favourable 3.3% interest rate backed by the EU. This gives an advantage to countries like Poland, which typically borrow at higher rates, around 5.5%. According to Poland's defence minister, Poland could receive up to 1/5 of the entire fund.
We are counting on some 30 billion euros, and that would be a great boost if we could use those funds. And if we could include this in contracts, those that have already been agreed to, that is an incredibly important initiative. This is extremely important for us.
SAFE represents the EU's first large-scale defence investment mechanism, marking a strategic shift towards greater European autonomy in security and defence policy.
We're talking about such areas as air defense, as ammunition, drones, perhaps also technologies using artificial intelligence.
The mechanism is driven by one key principle: to spend mostly locally, with 65% of the spending required to go to European producers.
Anybody who is inside the European Union. So if you are going to take the money from the EU, you should spend it in the EU.
However, multiple unknowns remain, particularly regarding the specific needs of member states, which will need to be addressed.
As soon as SAFE is fully announced, fully adopted, countries will have 2 months to give us their intentions. So they need to make the list of projects, programs, initiatives they want to start with this funding, and of course to tell us also what amounts are they looking for.
Competition over loan allocations may also arise.
Those who will use this facility will essentially apply earlier and get a green light. After a year or two, the premium will be on so-called joint projects.
And more competition could also be in sight. Just last week, the EU and the UK signed a defence pact. As details are being ironed out, it remains unclear whether London would get access to the newest loan mechanism. But the advancements of the European industrial base is not just a question of boosting the capabilities of production on a pan-European level. Individual member states also seek to establish national funds. The European Commission approved the creation of Poland's Security and Defence Fund, which will receive nearly 6 billion euros relocated from the National Reconstruction Fund. With loans and funding underway, the question remains whether EU member states will answer the call to buy arms. For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
7 years ago, Hungary was first threatened with having its EU voting rights stripped due to repeated rule of law violations. In another chapter of this saga, a subsequent round of talks occurred in Brussels on Tuesday among European leaders. But there was not enough support to go ahead with sanctioning Budapest. Now let's go live to our EU correspondent, Angela Skujins, to find out what happened during these talks. Good evening, Angela. So why was there not enough appetite to move forward with Article 7 to reprimand Hungary for those EU breaches?
Yes, so for a matter such as this to move forward, which would require sanctions being slapped on Budapest, as well as Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban having his very powerful veto voting right withdrawn, it requires a 4/5 majority at a council meeting. That was not garnered today, but we already knew from our EU sources this morning that they weren't totally sure how they would shift the dial there. But what is clear is Hungary's clear, blatant blatant breaches of EU law. We heard this from the European Commission and reiterated by the European Commissioner for Justice, Michael McGrath, as well as Poland's EU Affairs Minister, Adam Szłapka, at the tail end of these talks. Let's take a listen to their strident commentary.
Fundamental values. Every single member state should follow the rules.
Well, today's hearing highlighted that significant concerns persist and regrettably they have been aggravated. The Commission's position overall has not changed. The Article 7 procedure should be maintained as long as the issues that triggered it remain unresolved.
Now, for the last 15 years, serious concerns have emerged regarding the administration of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. This process of Article 7 was triggered 7 years ago in European Parliament. Today was the 8th hearing of that kind. So this has been a real anxiety of the EU for at least a decade. But the ante has been upped through a range of controversial legislation tabled by the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. The first being the LGBTIQ plus pride ban, which fines and surveils individuals that attend these events, while all out banning the pride event from occurring. There will be a real test of this next month at the official Pride March. The second piece of key legislation being that transparency bill, which is still up for debate. It hasn't passed through Budapest Parliament just yet, but we heard the Commissioner McGrath saying that he would launch infringement proceedings if that transparency bill went from debate to enshrined law.
Okay. So there is some more stuff. That I want to cover. But to be honest, I think I'm done with news. Holy fuck. This was intense. I'm gonna take a break and play something later. I think that's what I'm gonna do.